hosting. And we said that web hosting is the act of providing storage for a website, and that a web hosting service provider is a company that provides the services and technology required to enable a website to be viewed on the internet. I mentioned that when you go on a web browser and type in the domain name of a website, the domain name is converted into an IP address of the web hosting service provider's computer. The computer then connects to a server to retrieve the domain name's web pages and then delivers them to your web browser, enabling you to view the web pages on your screen. Now, large and established companies are able to self-host, meaning they can set up a server and network to run their website instead of renting server space from a provider. Small and medium companies that cannot afford to self-host have the option of renting third-party servers or buying web hosting services from a provider. Companies such as GoDaddy, AfriHost, Host Africa, Hostinger are providers of third-party web hosting services. Third-party web hosting is more cost-effective than self-hosting, and depending on your hosting needs, there are different classes of third-party web hosting services. The four that we will look at are shared hosting, virtual private server hosting, cloud hosting, and dedicated hosting. The rest of this video will explore each of these classes and we'll have a look at their similarities and differences. Let's start with shared hosting. Let's visit AfriHost to look at the different types of shared hosting services. Straight out of the gate, you can see that shared hosting is the cheapest type of web hosting. The reason for this is that shared hosting is considered an entry-level web hosting service. It's the type of web hosting that you use when you're still starting out with web hosting. So what is shared hosting and how does it differ from the rest of the third-party web hosting services? In the last video, I used the example of a house and I said that if a domain name is the address of a house, then the web hosting service is the actual house that the address points to. Let's continue with the house analogy. Now, if web hosting is a 3-bedroom house, then shared hosting would be having 3 different people sharing the 3-bedroom house. Now, if each person occupies each of the 3 rooms, then all 3 people will be sharing the kitchen, the living space, and the bathroom. So you can think of shared hosting as having multiple websites, possibly from multiple people, being housed in a single server. So you're having multiple websites that are being managed from the same server. Now, as you can see, AfriHost has 2 types of shared hosting. You have the Linux and Windows shared hosting. Now, there are different types of operating systems that you can use with your server. The 2 most common ones are Linux and Windows. The one that you use will not only impact the operating system, but it will impact performance, usability, and security. So unless you need to specify the Windows application of your website, the recommended option for shared hosting is Linux, since it's the more popular of the 2. Now, Linux shared hosting is recommended for beginners with little to no web hosting skills and a limited budget. It is also ideal for bloggers and small to medium business websites with a low to moderate traffic. Now, shared hosting becomes a problem when websites start to attract high volumes of traffic. And when your traffic increases, you will need to upgrade to another type of web hosting, most likely a virtual private hosting. And that's what we'll look at next. To understand the difference between virtual private server, or VPS for short, and shared hosting, let's revisit the example of a house. Now, instead of a house having 3 bedrooms, with VPS you have a house with 3 flatlets. Now, rather than having 3 different people sharing a kitchen, a living area, and a bathroom, you now have people who have their own small kitchen, living area, and bathroom within their small flatlets. So each person has their own 1 bedroom, small kitchen, living area, and a bathroom, all under the same roof. So with shared hosting, you have 3 separate bedrooms and a shared living space, kitchen, and a bathroom. And with virtual private server, you have a single house with 3 separate flatlets inside. So similar to the flatlets within a house, a VPS is a server running within a server. So you have one physical server that hosts multiple virtual servers. And each server is isolated from the rest of the servers. So it gives the illusion of a dedicated server. I'll come back to what a dedicated server is a little bit later on, but just understand that a virtual private server is very much similar to a dedicated server, or it gives the illusion of a dedicated server. So that's why in some cases you get virtual private servers being called virtual dedicated servers because of that illusory effect that's created by the isolation and the fact that a VPS can also run on its own operating system. Now, because of the V in VPS, some people think that a VPS and cloud hosting are one and the same thing. However, this is not 100% true. Recall that with a VPS, you have a single physical server that hosts multiple virtual servers. So with cloud hosting, you have access to multiple physical servers. Now, the difference between cloud hosting and VPS hosting is notable in 3 areas, and that's scalability, availability, and customizability. If your website's traffic fluctuates from being extremely high in one season to being extremely low in another season, cloud hosting will allow you to scale up and down depending on the demand with ease. Now, the same fluctuation with VPS might require you to switch to a shared hosting, for example, when the traffic is extremely low in order to save cost, and to switch again to a dedicated hosting when the traffic is extremely high, and then back again to VPS when the traffic is back to normal. This is because VPS doesn't allow you to scale very well. Now, most web hosting providers will say that their servers are up and running most of the time, but now and then you have what's called server downtime. And if you're using one physical server, as with the VPS, then when that server is down, your website is also not accessible or available on the internet. But with cloud hosting, you have access to multiple physical servers. So when one of them is experiencing downtime, there are others that are still up and running. So as previously mentioned, a VPS operates similar to a dedicated hosting in that if you have root access to the server, you can control the operating system and the server software. Now, when it comes to customization, cloud hosting offers a limited amount of customization, and this is because of the number of servers that you have to distribute the settings across. Now, because you have access to multiple servers, those servers will need to be configured. So from Host Africa VPS, hosting starts from 110 Rand, with cloud hosting starting at 130 Rand. So the reason why I wanted us to move from AfriHost to Host Africa to look at the difference is because some web hosting providers don't actually differentiate between VPS and cloud hosting, which obviously leads to confusion when you're also buying these type of services. So the last type of hosting is dedicated server hosting. And as already mentioned, VPS is quite similar to dedicated server hosting in that you have your own private virtual server while you share the physical server with other websites. So with dedicated hosting, you get your very own physical server. So instead of sharing the physical server and then getting a virtual server, with dedicated hosting, you have your very own physical server, and this can be more than one physical server. So this is the closest option to owning your own server. Dedicated hosting is like self-hosting without the responsibility of managing your own server. So you use dedicated hosting when you need scalability, availability, and customizability. And this is the most expensive of all the four hosting plans. Just to recap, when you start dabbling in the world of websites, the place to start is with shared hosting. When you start having an increase in the visitors to your website, you might want to upgrade to VPS. When that is no longer enough because your traffic has increased, you might want to either go with cloud hosting or dedicated hosting depending on the required level of customizability. Now, before buying any web hosting package, I will advise you to speak to a web hosting provider. Most of them have chat boxes. With AfriHost, I know they also have a WhatsApp number that you can WhatsApp them on. Just ask questions and then tell them the kind of website that you want to build, and then ask them to advise you on the right plan for your website. That is it for me. If you have any questions, you can direct them to my forum. And thank you for listening.